Hello, everybody, and welcome to another in our series of In Conversation with the Tomorrow Today Global team. My name is Graeme Codrington.
And I am Zanele Njapha, and we'd like to welcome you to this particular webinar, COVID Disruption and School. So we're talking all about how we go from crisis to opportunity, helping parents and educators to start to think differently about education today and well into the future.
So thank you for joining us. If this is your first time on Webinar Jam, why don't you just head across to the chat box. If you're on your computer, it's across to your right-hand side. If you're on your phone, you've got to flick left, right, up, depending on what phone you've got. But go to the chat box, just drop in your name, tell us where you're from. That'll just let us get an idea of our audience, but it will also just show you where the chat box is. We're going to take questions all the way through the webinar today. So if you have any question at any stage to do with schools and this opportunity mindset, please go into the chat box and put your question in. So don't be shy. I see we've already got 20 people with us live. Just go and say hi. If you're watching the repeat or a recording of the session, it's great to have you with us as well. And you can contact myself or Zanele via the Tomorrow Today Global website. That's tomorrowtodayglobal.com. Now, Zanele, what we wanted to do was we wanted to chat to schools, and that's teachers, school administrators, parents as well, and I suppose even the odd young person who wanted to come in. We know that there's a crisis. We know that COVID has hit schools dramatically, as much, maybe more than other parts of society because of the need for physical distancing and temperature checking and all the rest. That's made school quite difficult. And we know that there's a crisis. We know that schools are battling to get back into schooling or even considering whether to open or not. Some have opened and then had to close again because of the COVID issue. All of those things exist. And our focus is going to be really on what happens after that. But before we get to what happens after that, a lot of people are still in this crisis mentality. You're part of the Tomorrow Today team now. You're our unlearning and transitions expert, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means. But you spent quite a bit of your life before joining our team as a teacher. So, I mean, you must be in contact with some of your teacher friends. You must have a built-in memory of what it must feel like to be in school and in the staff room at the moment. What's interesting for you as you look at the crisis now, and then we'll talk about the opportunity in a moment.
Sure. So there's so many things happening at the moment. And I think the best part is that I have that opportunity to still converse with some teachers and parents during this particular time. One of the most interesting things that are going on particularly is issues with the curriculum. A lot of educators and even parents are finding themselves on the end of the spectrum where they're questioning what the curriculum is going to look like. Do we have enough time to complete everything? Where to from here? And this is exactly the question that educational stakeholders across the board, across the world, are starting to ask themselves, is where do we go from here? And what does the future of education actually look like? Because I think one thing, a lot of individuals have actually become cognizant of the fact that education is going to need to be reimagined. And it's that whole rewriting of the script, and the slate is now wiped clean, so to speak. So it's where do we go from here? And there's that anxiety that's sort of filtering around with everyone about whether we know what it's going to look like and what it is going to look like going forward. So UNESCO released some figures early on in March that we had about 80% of the world's learners not at school at the beginning of March. And that number actually rose to 90% towards the end of March. And we know with different countries, around that time was when different countries went into different stages of lockdown. So if you can think about that many children not going to school at that time, what the implications on global education are going to be, I think, and I don't want to be a spoiler, but I think this is a really exciting time for schools and for education as a whole, whether you're looking at primary school, secondary school, or even at the tertiary level. So I think at this time, schools have really been shown whether they were swimming naked or not, as Warren Buffett says, because the tide has gone out and it's time.
Yeah. And I mean, this leads us to what we wanted to talk about. We can probably ignore, and ignore's the wrong word, but we can put to one side the high stakes assessment years. So in South Africa, we call it matric, it's A levels, it's the school leaving certificate stuff. We can understand why education departments around the world are desperate to just make sure that this year's exit exams happen. So we're going to leave that to the side because there are all sorts of considerations around matric or school leavers. But for all the other grades, for all the other year groups, basically the situation is obviously deal with the crisis stuff, make sure that your school is safe and has got all the healthcare in place. But this is the point, Zanele, you're exactly right. From a curriculum perspective, there is not a single chance that any subject or teacher is likely to get through the curriculum this year. Even if you can find the hours somewhere, and I think it's immensely irresponsible to just say, let's not have holidays. The school rhythm is a rhythm for a reason. Teachers are not lazy with all the holidays they have. That's the time they use for preparation. It's the time you need, because when your brain is working that hard and your body is working that hard, you really are wiped out after 9 or 10 weeks. So there's a rhythm to the school year that's important to the learning. Otherwise, we can shove facts in and it'll just flow out again and doesn't get processed down to long-term memory. So all of that stuff is a given. And this is where I think you and I really thought that this would be a great topic, is because if we're going to have to reduce the curriculum load in 2020 and probably in 2021 as well, then why don't we do it forever? Instead of just thinking about doing something for the sake of surviving the crisis, why don't we actually take this opportunity and say, maybe this is the opportunity every good teacher's actually been wanting for a while anyway, to do a reform of the curriculum, of the hidden curriculum, and so on. So I know you're passionate about this. What do you think the attitude shift should be from crisis to opportunity?
Sure. I'm so excited that you said that, Graeme, because that's what this is. It's an opportunity for us to reimagine what education is. And I think a lot of people, especially when I was a teacher, we used to speak to a lot of individuals, whether they're parents or wherever they find themselves in the educational system, saying that the education system is consistently not only failing children, but it's failing society as a whole. And I think that that's where we need to start. Why is it that we have those particular feelings around the education system and we feel like it's failing children? It's because really it's not speaking to what we want the future of work to be and the type of individuals that we want to be feeding into the workforce tomorrow. So I just have 3 different points that I want to make to this, that I'd like everyone who's present today and everyone who's also going to watch the replay to start to think about as we reimagine what the face of education is going to be. And what I want to say before I start is that no one really has the actual picture. And that's the exciting part, is that even teachers and parents don't have the exact picture of what education is going to look like in the future. But it's our responsibility to collectively reimagine it and start to think about the things we want to change and what kind of society we want to build as we start to work with these little minds that are so nimble and easy for us to work with as we go forward. So the very first one I want to just start to think about are future skills. Whether you're looking at the World Economic Forum, today, we've got our sets of 8 skills, and a lot of other organizations will release top skills that will make whichever individual that's going into the workforce or even a business nimble or flexible enough to actually cope in the 2020s and even beyond that. And I think that this is an approach that we need to start to take in education as well, especially if we want to make sure that the individuals that are in the workforce in 20 to 30 years' time actually speak directly to what we're looking for. And Graeme, I've always had this conversation of the skills that we want to embody in organizations are skills that children don't even have to think twice about. And I think that that's the best part. And that's where we need to go back to. If you think about things like inquisitiveness, resilience, creativity, frankness, calling a spade, and those types of things are skills that children already embody, and they show up in the classroom consistently. And I think that if we can start to look at those types of things and those skills as skills that our workforce needs in the future, that children already have, and then start to work around those as key points. Do you have something you'd like to just add on that, Graeme? Because I know you've got children and you've worked quite a bit.
I just want to agree with you entirely. You know, the best teachers that I've engaged with over the last few years, and I'm on the board of a girls' school in Johannesburg and work with a number of schools around the world, actually. The best teachers that I've heard have always complained that the curriculum gets in the way of the stuff they're trying to teach. You know, and I think the best teachers have actually done some of this work. They've looked at the World Economic Forum Future Skills, and they've said, I really do want to help the kids in my classroom get those skills. I suppose maybe the older you get in the school system, the more those curriculum requirements come in on you. And in the lekker in the comments has said that here in South Africa, the Department of Education has given some guidelines of trimming down the curriculum. And in the lekker, that's exactly right. What Zanele and I are suggesting is we should never go back again. If we're now looking in 2020 and saying, well, what are some of the things we could take out of the curriculum in order to get through 2020? As far as possible, we should never put those other things back in again. And we should leave the curriculum a little bit empty, give ourselves, 20%, 30% of space. And then this is your point, isn't it, Zanele, that what goes into that space, well, there's a whole lot of future skills that will be very valuable to add into that space.
Exactly. So, and the future skills don't need to be outright content-based skills where you say, okay, everyone sit down, now we're teaching how to be a little bit more nimble or how to be inquisitive. There's skills that you can sort of hide in your lessons, in the curriculum, hide in your activities that you execute within the classroom that help to start to garner these skills and to make children a lot sharper when it comes to how resilient they are, and giving opportunities where they can fail, where they can make mistakes, and a classroom environment that starts to hone these skills, so that when they do get out into the working world, they're a lot more ready for not just to be consumers, as we say.
Exactly. And that's one of the most important future skills, in our opinion, from Tomorrow Today, is the ability to be comfortable with experimentation, which means the ability to be comfortable asking great questions, investigating something where you don't know the answer in advance, doing something that isn't programmed to produce a specific outcome, in other words, a test result, but is just an experiment for the sake of the joy of experimentation and learning and growth and development. And of course, the ability to make mistakes where the mistake is the point. And, you know, this is going to force teachers, and I think this, I've now hijacked your first point. I know you've got two more, but you probably, if I can guess, at least one of them has got to do with changing the way we have assessments, because why should we be testing what you can remember and what your memory is? And shouldn't we be assessing your ability to thrive and be successful? And that's a different type of assessment. But anyway, now I'm probably stealing your point. So back to you, Zanele, for your second point.
No, it's all right. Please feel free. I like that you're getting excited, because this is actually quite exciting, especially if you're someone who is a parent and you've had to interact with the child one-on-one, and you can see that ingenuity that's already there, which is what we try to hone even later on. And we sort of try to unlearn some of these things because we have had it in us all along. So really that first point of future skills is to say, let's work with what we have and work from there. So it's that kind of known to unknown. And teachers now are quite aware that whether you're working with the curriculum or outside the curriculum, we're trying to take on an approach of known to unknown. It starts with understanding that children are not blank slates, and that there is something that we can build off of or build onto. And that's practically what the future skills is about. And then the second one is a concept that's been extensively used in education as well, lifelong learning, or as I always say, lifelong teaching as well. Because if you look at it, whether it's from the perspective of the educator, or the perspective of the learner, or even the parent, we're all lifelong learners, but we're also lifelong teachers. And a learner thrives a lot better when they understand that they are in a position to not only share insights, but to also take them in. And that is going to speak a little bit more to my last point of interconnectivity, but lifelong learning really is about, I'm always learning, but I'm also always teaching. So I have something to contribute. And as teachers, this is something we need to start to understand as well. We've got a lot to contribute, but we also have a lot to learn. And one of the main points, and now is going to get a little bit frisky, but is specialization versus flexibility. We've been taught so often to specialize in the schooling system and choose a subject specialization that you'll continue or take out into the workplace. But what I want to encourage is that within the education system, as we now start to need to start to look at a flexibility approach, where it's okay to specialize and hone in on a particular skill or set of insights, but also start to explore, know a little bit about a few different things, because that's what our world needs to be. Our education system in today's world needs to be a system that doesn't teach learners, but rather teaches learners how to learn. And I think that's one of the most important things, Graeme, and I'd like to hear what you think about that. But it's preparing learners for an uncertain future is not what we're doing at the moment, unfortunately, because we're teaching with the assumption that we know what's going to happen. Once we start to take an approach of teaching learners how to learn, it means that no matter what happens on the other side of your 12 years in the schooling system, because you understand what it takes to learn, you'll then be able to approach whatever it is and to start to contribute in the way that you need to.
Zanele, I agree with you. And this now actually comes to some of the work that you and I and our team at Tomorrow Today are actually doing with schools at the moment. Because yes, of course, there is a crisis response that's required. But what we're hoping that we can help schools to see is that some of what you might do to respond to the crisis is going to actually revolutionize education. And so a number of those things, and this flows exactly out of what you've just said, is that, a lot of teachers picked a lane. So they chose a subject speciality or a grade speciality and so on. Right now, in the crisis, here's one of the cleverest things that schools could do. Let's choose geography as a subject, for example. Right now, there are probably 1,000 geography teachers in South Africa custom designing, handcrafting a lesson for tomorrow. And they're working hard at it because they've got to put that lesson online, and they weren't expecting to be online this time last year. And they've got to think through what that looks and feels like in a virtual space. And even if they're in a physical space, it's an unusual physical space with kids in masks and, physical distancing and so on. So there's a lot of effort going in. Why? Why should 1,000 teachers, or however many there are, all do the same work when one of them is going to do it the best? And why aren't we recording some of these sessions, putting them online? Why do all of these webinar sessions have to be live? Most of you who watch this webinar will watch the recording of it. And hopefully you get as good an experience as anybody who's watching it live. And why shouldn't we be doing that in school? Now, this is called the flipped classroom. My view is that 3 years from now, we should still be doing that. Some of the data transfer, I don't want to be rude and call it data dumping, but sometimes it is that. Some of the data transfer should be done via video. And you as the teacher don't necessarily have to do it because maybe that's not your skill set. So maybe we've got to look at our school and we've got to say, which are the 5 teachers in the school that are best in front of video? And then if we discover that none of the geography teachers are good in front of video, phone the school down the road and say, hey, are any of your geography teachers good in front of video? And so we begin to get collaboration between schools, collaboration between departments in schools, collaboration between teachers. And then I think some teachers might be better as connectors rather than content creators. And so the video, you might even find a video from somewhere else in the world that you say to the kids, watch the video, and then you have a connection with the kids rather than think that the job of teacher is just to transfer information. Maybe now's the time to reclaim the label of educator, which means that sometimes you'll do education without teaching. And I think the reason that what you said jumped to there in my brain, Zanele, is because teachers have a wonderful opportunity right now to actually demonstrate adaptability, innovation, and change to the young people, which will speak louder than anything they might say in their classrooms. If young people see teachers adapting and adapting well, it will make a lasting impact on them. And that, in my mind, is education.
Precisely. Very, very nice, Graeme. And I just want to emphasize that these three points that I'm making really are not just related to something that the learners need to be learning, but they're for teachers, they're for parents, and therefore each and every individual that's involved in the education system and wants to see any kind of change or advancement within education in today's world. So those future skills apply to parents, they apply to teachers, and they also apply to learners, and in the lifelong learning as well. It's just the same. And to speak to your point, my very last point out of the three, you stole right out of my clutches, is interconnectivity. And this interconnectivity or systems kind of thinking or approach is not restricted to just the curriculum. It's everywhere. And I think one of the greatest responses that we're seeing across the world with organizations like the World Economic Forum, UNESCO, Microsoft, we're seeing a lot of interconnectivity in terms of partnerships to help and to aid the advancement of education. And that's the very last thing that I want to encourage, is that those partnerships where it's across public and private sector with alone standing organizations, and even, like you said, Graeme, the school down the road or the school in the other district. All of those types of partnerships really are going to be the key to advancing education in the 21st century, especially in a COVID world. And not just within the classroom, but it's our teaching methods as well. I mean, not just outside of the classroom, but also within the classroom. The way we teach, our teaching methods and the resources that we make use of are now going to be interconnected. So your classroom needs to be a lot more open to all of these different kinds of advancement, where the education is made up of different parts or different types of elements that make up the education experience. And this speaks quite a lot to an anxiety that many teachers are having at the moment. What is my job going to look like? Will I even have a job? And it speaks to what you just said a little earlier, Graeme, that educator is now so different from what it used to be, where it's chalk and talk and you stand in the front and you do what you need to do and then you chuck the learners out. It's the holistic kind of experience that really does need to be made of different forms of stimuli that still, even behind a screen at times, will develop the learner holistically. And I think that that's where the biggest challenge starts to come in. Having taken away a lot of our cultural activities and sports, for probably the next 2 or so years, education is going to be flipped on its head. Now, the question that teachers are starting to ask is, how do we develop, how do we holistically build these children or these learners into who we want them to become, or who they have the potential to become, rather, on the other side, especially if we're sort of trying to rewrite the script at the moment. So I think that those are 3 of the things I'd like to start to turn the wheel on as we start to rethink education.
So what we want to try and do is to help schools and educators to think in 3 different ways. The first is to think that while we're in the middle of this crisis, let's do clever things. So we're not just responding to the crisis, trying to get through 2020, but we're using the opportunity of the crisis to think slightly bigger. And the 3 points that Zanele has made are the 3 things you can add to your crisis response. The second thing that we need to do is to think wider than just what is the response in my classroom, in my subject, in my field of expertise. And you know, right now, and I can really speak from a South African perspective here more clearly, is that the Department of Education has mainly been focused during lockdown on how to rescue the matric year this year. And yes, they've got a few other plans in place for everybody else, but mainly, and I'm not trying to oversimplify what the government regulations in education are, but they've basically said, do your best for everybody else. So here's matric, and then do your best. And I honestly think that they are open to hearing from schools, opening to hearing from principals about what the principals want to do. And I think if the principals of those schools deliver a reasonable educational outcome, the Department of Education is going to largely be happy with it, which means teachers, you need to be supporting your principals. And saying to the principal, we're not just trying to get back to normal. We're not just trying to get the school back to how it used to be. We're trying to do something else here. This is the point we're trying to make, that you need to move away from just a crisis response to recognizing the opportunity that this crisis gives us. And the third thing then is to give your staff team a little bit of breathing room to actually have these conversations. And that might mean rearranging your staff room just a little bit, pulling a few teachers out of the classroom. Maybe this is a time for the sports coaches and the support staff to shine a little bit more, because you don't have the extracurricular activities, you don't have sport going on. So there are professionals in your system that you can pull in to help you and help some of the key members of your team get a little bit of space to think about this opportunity. You're not going to deal with the opportunity mindset if you're in crisis response mode every hour of every day for the next few months. And what Zanele and I and our team at Tomorrow Today want to do is to help you to think through this. Every school is different. Every area of the country, every area of the world has its own uniquenesses about it, so it's difficult to give generic advice, but we'd love to work with schools, with your school environment, to help you think through some of these issues and get you thinking opportunity and innovation and unlearning mindset.
And I think just to add on to that, Graeme, before we take a few questions, I would love to see what we've got in the chat box that we can start to address, is just to add to your point that we need to start to understand the power that we have, even with the chains of the curriculum, if I can call them that can be extremely restrictive. And as someone who's been a teacher for a few years, I understand better than anyone that the pace of the system is a lot slower than what we'd like it to be. So all of these advances that are happening at the moment are going to take quite a while to fully materialize. And therefore, I think that it's important for us to start to look at what power do we have even with that. So let's start to focus, and this is where the opportunity mindset comes in. Focus on what you have the power to change, or what you have the power to actually affect within the situation. I was speaking to a group of homeschooling teachers at once. They called me out and said, can you just come and share a few things with us? We're struggling a little bit with the homeschooling thing. And one of the parents said that society is asking my child to be one thing, but on the other hand, I'm trying to sort of build my own little curriculum and see what's going on to help my child out to be this type of individual that goes out into the working world. And I mentioned a story, if you'll humor me here for a few minutes, Graeme. A story that I mentioned to this particular parent was the story of Steve Harvey. So just to go over it quickly, Steve Harvey had an opportunity when he was a very young boy at school. The teacher asked all of the learners, she said, okay, everyone, why don't you write down on a little piece of paper what you'd like to be when you grow up? And so all the children went away. They wrote down on these pieces of paper what they'd like to go up. And Steve Harvey was called over to the front of the class to show everyone what he'd written on that piece of paper. And he got up to the class and he said that I've written down that when I grow up, I'd like to be on TV. I'd like to be on television. And the teacher said, okay, I'm not so sure. Who have you seen or who have you known in your family who's ever been on TV? And so he went home, and when he had an opportunity to speak to his father said, all right, I see what you've written, but his mother was very cross. And she said, all right, Steve's father, speak to him. I don't know what he's done. The teacher asked them to do something and he did something completely different. And the father said to him, all right, Steve, I see what you've written on the piece of paper, and that's what you want to be. And I understand that. But what I want you to do is I want you to take a separate piece of paper, and on the separate piece of paper, what do you think the teacher wanted you to write? And he said, oh, doctor or teacher or whatever. And so he wrote one of those conventional expectations that the teacher had on another piece of paper. And then the dad said, I want you to take the original piece of paper where you wrote that you want to be on television, and then I want you to put it up in your room somewhere where you can see it every single day. And then I want you to take this one back to the teacher. And then he got to the teacher, and the teacher said, that's much better. But what I want to sort of emphasize with this story is that we need to be those types of teachers. We need to be those types of parents, that even though we understand that society is lagging behind in terms of actually creating the type of workforce that we want for tomorrow, that are going to come up with those unicorn companies, etc., we need to understand the power that we have. You spend hours with these children on a daily basis. Make the difference in that little circle that you have, and understand that what you do in that classroom outside of the curriculum is going to matter so much more. And this is what you were saying, Graeme, it's going to matter so much more in the long run. And if you know Steve Harvey, you'll know you can't flip the channel without seeing his face on television, all because of just that little bit of inspiration. Do we have any? Let me see if we have any.
No, thank you, Zanele. That's exactly right. And I suppose our main message, and then we'll get to Q&A. So if you have any specific questions, please put them into the chat box for us. But our main point is this. We are passionate, we always have been passionate about innovation in education. I mean, Zanele, that was your focus as when you were a teacher, your focus was on curriculum innovation. And so it's always been a passion for us. We just believe that now's the time to actually do something about it. You know, there is a reason. Zanele in the comments said, you know, that often teachers and principals are a bit conservative, a bit nervous. And you know what, at one level, I'm not unhappy with that. The last thing you want is a crazy maverick teacher who tries something spectacularly brilliant for a year that doesn't work, right? Mm-hmm. Then your child goes through a whole year and the teacher gets to the end of the year and says, well, you know, sorry, didn't quite work out, you know, good luck next year. You know, and your child's education has taken a bit of a knock, a bit of a stuff up. You can't really afford that, right? So naturally, I understand that schools are kind of conservative places because you can't stuff up a kid's life. But this is 2020, right? It's stuffed up already. Nobody's ever going to look back and say, what happened in 2020? I don't understand why there's a bit of a mess here. It's a mess already. So use the mess. That's the point, really, is embrace the fact that this is the time to do it. And it strikes me, Zanele, that it might be the younger teachers that get this right. It might be the younger teachers who are more comfortable with the technology, more open to change, less stuck in their ways, more willing to experiment. And so again, maybe if you're a leader in a school, maybe now's the time to rely more on your younger teachers who, let's be honest, in most schools, teachers are there because they have a passion for the profession. Honestly, if you don't know what else to do with your life, there are a lot easier things to do than become a school teacher. And I am a passionate supporter and protector of school teachers because they get a bad rap, and I think it's ridiculous. They are professionally trained professionals who are doing this for both professional and passion reasons. In my mind, perfection. Too many P's in that sentence. But the point is that younger teachers, maybe this is the time to say to them, hey, why don't you try some of the stuff you were maybe dreaming of while you were at teaching college and while you were at university. Maybe we want to try some of those things you had in your mind when you were sitting in a school classroom and saying, I want to be a teacher. I think I can do this job. I think I can do it better than this teacher who's in front of me right now. Maybe now's the time to activate the younger teachers in your system. So there's a whole lot of stuff that you as a school leader, if you are a school leader watching this video, it's a whole lot of stuff that you could do right now. Just got to get out of that crisis mindset, and then you'll begin to discover what you could be doing. I think there's a remarkable opportunity. Zanele, are there any questions or anything, any just comments? I think there's some great comments we could probably just highlight, if not any specific.
A lot of great comments. I see Gina's asking, so she's saying that she loves our energy. Well done, Graeme. Even with your age, you've still got energy.
Wow. Wow.
And she's asking how we get that energy to our principals. And this is exactly what you were saying about the young individuals within the staff. But I want to just emphasize here that it's not necessarily always the case. It's not always the young ones. Yes, the young ones come in starry-eyed and bushy-tailed, but sometimes you actually find, and I've met quite a few teachers that are willing to experiment regardless of how old or how experienced they've become. And the best thing here is that you start to understand that the experienced teachers are experienced because they know what loopholes there are and what loopholes there aren't. And so this is a great opportunity to then start to get closer, because what we do as young teachers, a lot of the time we come into the face of the principal or the SMT, the school management team, and we go, we know what to do, everyone step aside. But this really is an opportunity for the people who've been around for a long time, who know what's worked and what hasn't in the history of education, or in the history of the school particularly, to sit down together and to start to collaborate around what works, what hasn't, and what we can do, what can be moved, and where are the little loopholes that we can start to work from, especially as we try to keep the department happy and also do justice by the children.
No, thank you so much, Zanele. You rescued me there, because I'm suddenly realizing I've got a lot of friends and family members who would be considered to be older teachers, and they would be swearing at me now, saying, what? You're saying the older teachers are not going to be able to contribute? Let me add to what you've said. A lot of older teachers have maybe in the past said, no, for example, no, let's not put lessons online. It's much better to be in the classroom face to face. Let's not do video, for these lessons. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. That's not the point of the statement. The point is that they might have had very good pedagogical, educational, relational reasons for being a little bit conservative about a lot of change. Now, they don't have an option, right? For at least a few months, they've been forced to change, and they're brilliant. They're brilliant educators. So now they're in an environment where they say, well, we've got to do it anyway. I bet you that a lot of them are going to be quite impressive, and maybe even impress themselves with their ability to deliver something in this environment. They are trained professionals, they are passionate professionals, and I think given half a chance, we'll discover that they will rise to the occasion. So you're absolutely right. It's not about saying to the oldies in the staff room, step aside. It's about saying, hey, what can we all do together, and how can we collaborate? Again, one of your themes. How do we connect and collaborate with each other to get the best possible outcome at the moment?
Absolutely. And I think that's where most of the opportunity is going to come. It's when we start to do that. I don't see any more questions, but I see a lot of great comments. And if I can make one final point, Graeme, before then you can just sort of look through the comments and see if we have a question that we can address before we go. It's the issue of life skills. And I think you'll remember when you did LO in school, and when I did LO in school, LO, or life orientation or life skills, was really considered the skate through subject. Quite unfortunately as well, because if you start to think about what LO is supposed to do for learners and what it's supposed to do for students, it should actually be the 90% of the curriculum rather than the 10% that it's actually doing. Because if you think about what LO is supposed to be, those are life skills that are supposed to help children to navigate their way through life. But unfortunately, it's been reduced. And a lot of allo teachers, if we have any in the room, I'd be interested to hear from them, really have had that grievance for a long time. And I think that that's a really great place to start. That if we are going to start to expand on these life skills that will help these learners to start to become competent in these future skills we were speaking about earlier, rather than, reproduction and those types of things, which are also quite important, we need to start to look at what other life skills there are and how we can move these into the curriculum very subtly, but also very intentionally as well.
I've looked through the comments. There are just a lot of great comments there. So let's wrap this up. We know that everybody's we're 12 weeks or whatever it is into. We're in the 12th week of March, I think, at the moment. I have no idea where we are in lockdown, but I think everybody's kind of zoomed and webinared out. So we're not going to extend this further. If you would like more information, please connect with us. Our website is Tomorrow Today Global, all one word, tomorrowtodayglobal.com, and you can get in touch with myself, with Zanele, with any one of our team. But I just want to pick up a comment that, oh, now it's disappearing, that Alison made about parents. We've got to bring parents along on this journey. We've been suggesting to schools over the last few weeks that they take one of their most experienced teachers out of the classroom and make them a parent liaison at the moment. I've heard some horrible stories from schools of parents getting together and signing petitions against the teachers during lockdown because they say the teachers haven't done enough teaching in the last few weeks. It's ridiculous that parents do not understand the difference between teaching and education. If the teachers are putting connection ahead of curriculum, they're doing the right thing. If our children reach the end of this year and they are emotionally and physically and psychologically healthy, if they are well as individuals, then we would have done a good thing. If they're stressed out and freaking out, then we would have made a mistake. And if our kids get to the end of this year and they are in love with learning, we would have succeeded, regardless of what has been learnt. And so many parents are just saying, why aren't you delivering the curriculum, when good professional teachers are saying, I'm doing education here. I'm connecting with your child. I'm keeping them loving learning. I'm keeping them healthy and well. And teachers, keep doing the right thing. Don't get under pressure from parents to justify the fees and everything else, but just dumping curriculum on them. And hopefully you can send this video to some of your parents as well, so that they get a sense of what it is that education should be doing during the COVID crisis. That'll be my final word. Zanele, I'll hand over to you to finish us off and close out this session. Thank you for joining us, everybody.
I think very well wrapped up, Graeme. Just to emphasize one of the last things that you said, I think this is the time to really appreciate the diversity of ideas and the diversity that we have within our classrooms, whether it's in our teachers, in our educational stakeholders, your parents, your educators, the children themselves. We started off by saying that each and every individual has something to teach and also has something to learn. And if I think that that's one thing we can grasp from this entire webinar, then there will be something that positive that you can do to influence the future of the education system, wherever it is that you're watching from.
Thank you, everybody. Please share this video with those people who might find it useful. It's been great spending some time with you, and all the best, especially to the teachers. You've got a remarkable job ahead of you in the next few months. Thank you for your investment in our children.